All right, thank you for joining us. Today, Pat and I want to get into a question that we are asked so often. What is asset protection? It's a service that our firm specializes in. We do a bunch of, and I think it'd just be good to kind of go over what is asset protection? What can you protect your assets from? Pat, I mean, are these are the questions you're getting a lot too, I assume.
Yeah, and the thing is, terms like asset protect people talk about protection all the time. And what does that involve? There are insurance solutions, there are structural solutions, there are legal solutions. How can we protect what you have spent your whole life working for, building up? How can we protect that from certain threats? And what are those threats? I mean, there are things like divorce, things like bankruptcy, things like long-term care costs. What if you have dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's? What if you have a medical expense that winds up costing you, your family, $10,000, $12,000 a month? How can we protect what you've built up against that? There are a lot of financial advisors, wealth advisors, people out there who are fantastic at building up those assets, and they do a great job of it. But how do you shield those from some of the legal threats that are out there? And that's what we focus in. That's what we specialize in, and so that's what we'd like to talk about a little bit today.
Yeah, and I would say that estate planning as a whole has changed dramatically over time. I mean, people are living longer. The things that affect your estate today are just different than what they used to be. Long-term care, I mean, the percentages show that most of us at some point in time in our life will end up in, whether you call it a skilled nursing, a long-term care facility, which can be incredibly expensive. I mean, ten to $15,000 a month currently, and we can only estimate what that's going to look like in 10 years from now.
Absolutely. I just a couple points on that. One is you were saying it's the changing landscape. You go back 20 years, right? You go back to the year 2000. The concern was not long-term care. The concern was the estate tax. Because you go back to that time, the estate tax kicked in at $600,000. If you were leaving more than 600,000 to your kids, there was a state tax, and that was a big issue. Today, it's not 600,000; it's 11.5 million. So if your estate is less than 11.5 million, you're not really concerned about estate tax. And then
Right.
we've got long-term care. You go back to the early 2000s, you go back to 1997, which is as far back as Michigan Medicaid has the records. It was 3441. So $3,441 per month is what it costs to be in a skilled facility. 3,400 a month is not cheap, but for a lot of people, it's doable if that
Yeah.
covers everything.
Well,
But that's not where we're at now. As Mike said, 9, 10, 12, $15,000 a month is what you're looking at for skilled care. And for a lot of folks, you were saying about how often people need skilled care. It's not 100% of people, but about 80% of us, those are pretty good odds, will
yeah.
need some sort of long-term care. And then you start to break that down. And I've had this conversation with so many people. They're like, well, my dad did this, my mom did that. It's a little bit different now. And yeah, 80% of us will need long-term care, but the majority of those are not people who will need, years and years in the nursing home. Statistics say about 12% of us will be in a nursing home for greater than 5 years. But how significant is that? I mean, if 80% of us will need some sort of long-term care, and the odds are greater than 1 in 10 that we will be in a nursing home for more than 5 years. I mean, what does that say? What is that threat? The analogy I always use is a seatbelt. Planning for that possibility, planning for that eventuality is similar to putting on a seatbelt. You put it on every time you get in the car. And the last 10,000 times you got in the car, you did not get in a car accident, but you still put it on because what about next time? And that's the 1 in 10,000 odds. Now, the odds are about 1 in 10 that you'll be in a nursing home for longer than that. Are you not going to put on your seatbelt for that? I mean, for crying
Right.
out loud.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, Pat, everything you're talking about, that's a lot what we do in our elder law side of our practice. But there's so many other things that can be threats to an estate as well. I mean, the new changes in the law that relate to, you know, insurance and automobiles in Michigan. I mean, they are saying that litigation on that is going to increase significantly. And if
Hmm.
someone has their assets held in an asset protection trust, it's essentially peace of mind. I mean, you know, they don't have to worry about, if they're sued, those assets being exposed.
And Mike, that is so perfectly on point with the conversations I've been having that you've been having over the last few days. Um, Historically, people in Michigan have not been concerned about being sued because they were in a car accident. Because in Michigan, historically, we've had unlimited coverage and no fault insurance. It's part of why Michigan's auto insurance is, by a huge margin, the most expensive anywhere in the country. Um, it really, really is. As somebody who's lived in multiple states and then had to get insurance here, it was like, holy God, there has to be something wrong with this. Um, but that change that's happening on July 1 will radically alter the way that auto insurance works in Michigan and will open every single resident of the state to potentially massive liability, because
Mhm.
you will be personally responsible, potentially, depending on, circumstances of the accident and all that, and the coverage of the other person involved. Now people will be able to get much, much lower levels of coverage. That'll be a lot cheaper, and that's great for them. But it means that if there is an accident and if there is a catastrophic injury, well, now we've got some real significant payouts. However, you can plan your estate, you can plan your trust in a way that will shield you from that. We recently did, back on, I want to say, June 1st, about 3 weeks ago, we did a show with Mick McNeil. That was excellent. We went into a lot of detail on that. And if you look down our YouTube channel, that's on there as well. Maybe if that's something that's interesting to you, worth your time. But this whole asset protection side, from that level of liability, is something that has never, ever affected Michigan drivers or Michigan residents before, and will change dramatically in 9 days. Just to say, I mean, that's significant.
Yep. And so, Pat, you know, we've covered, you know, long-term care costs, auto accidents in Michigan. Another big one that a lot of families, or business owners, you know, don't think about is the exposure of their own business. You know, if you're a business owner and you've worked so hard to grow your business, it's essentially what your family relies on for income. Those assets are exposed as well if something bad happens in your personal life. So that's one more layer of asset protection that a lot of families and business owners don't think about, but you know, it's definitely something that can be done.
Oh, absolutely. And that is something where, whenever we're talking with business owners, be they small, medium sized, we haven't landed Ford yet, but we're working on that one. Those businesses, people think about liability one way, but liability goes both ways. If you establish a business, and for simplicity's sake, we'll talk about a rental property, because there's a lot of people who own one or two rental homes, and what they'll do, if they're smart, or they could be smart and not do this, but they
Yeah.
should. They really should. If you own a rental property, it should be held in an LLC. But an LLC is a one-way protection. What that means is, if somebody in that rental home has a slip and fall, they're injured, there's a fire, something like that, the liability is limited to the assets within the LLC. It could be limited to the home. But the flip side is this: that LLC affords no protection if you cause an issue. So if you personally are sued, or if you become ill, if you develop Alzheimer's, or if there is something that comes after you, then that claim, that litigant, they can go after that property. That's why we want to put that property inside of a trust. The LLC shields you from the liability of the business. The trust shields the business from the liability of you. It's a two-way thing. You want to make sure, okay, we've got the one issue covered. LLC is a great way to protect from that. But how do we make sure that if you get sick or if you get divorced or if something happens, your business, your investment, what you've worked on and grown is still protected?
Yep, absolutely. Pat, I got one last question for you before we wrap up. So the estate plan that I had in place, that I had put in place when my
Mhm.
kids were young, so that they don't inherit money early, and I picked who would be guardian conservator. Does that trust and plan do everything that you're talking about? Because I think that's a big misconception, that at least questions I get is, well, I have a trust. I mean, doesn't it do all the things you're saying?
Mhm. Well, short answer, Mike, without looking at your particular documents, I have
Good
no idea.
point.
So I
Good
would be
point.
speaking off the cuff because that actually is a really common issue that comes up a lot, which is I have a will, I have a trust, I have powers of attorney. Whenever somebody says I have these things, I say, great, let's see them. Because if you don't actually look at the actual documents, you have no idea what's there. A will, a trust, powers of attorney, those are broad categories. It's the same thing as saying, I have a house, I have a car, I have a bicycle. Those are all things, and we know what a house, a car, a bike, we know what that looks like. But is it, a $40 Huffy from Walmart, or is it a $3,000 Cannondale? Is it a castle or is it a mobile home? Like it really does matter. If you say I have this thing, that tells us a little bit, but by no means does it give it the whole story. And you can create a trust that will protect not only what you have, but protect things for ensuing generations, protect it from divorce, protect it from lawsuit, um, mental health or substance abuse issues. There's a lot of stuff out there. And if you craft your estate plan properly, you can guard against that. But with a lot of people, and it's through no fault of their own, they'll say, oh, I set up this trust, so it's taken care of. Until you look at it, you really don't know what issues are addressed and what issues aren't, which is part of why we try to make things as open as possible here at the firm. If you have an existing estate plan, if you have a trust, if you have a will, there's no cost, there's no issue. You want us to review it, or you want us to give an opinion on it, just send it over, give a call. Yeah, I mean, probably don't mail it to us without letting us know ahead of time. But the idea is, if you're wondering, hey, what will this do if I'm incapacitated or if I pass away? More than happy to take a read through, because we see some that are awesome. And Mike, I know you've seen this as well. We'll see another trust and be like, you know what? We should use that language. That's smart. That's good. You want to learn from other people, but you
For
see a
sure.
lot where you're like, you know what? Not to criticize, but X, Y, and Z are either not addressed here or there's kind of a hole there. And so we
Mhm.
want to make sure that we've got that covered.
Yeah, no, great points, Pat. And I think you hit it right on the head there, that, things change over time. What was important to you 20 years ago could be different now. It's worth just doing a review to kind of just get a refresher on, what does your estate plan currently do? Is it just a probate avoidance plan, or, what exactly is happening? So I know our contact information is scrolling at the bottom there. Give us a call at 1-800-ESTATES for an initial consultation. Or reach out on our website. We have a contact form there that you can easily get in touch with Pat or I if you have asset protection concerns and you want to just talk through those, and how does everything work for you, because everyone's got a unique situation.
And I know I talk too much, but just 2 seconds real quick because of what you just said there. You said, if your situation has changed, your situation might have not changed at all. Your life might be identical in almost every way to the way that it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. The law has changed. The world has changed around you. You can stand in one place unmoving, but if the world moves around you, that changes how things work for you. With the passage of the Secure Act, with a number of things that have happened over the last 2 weeks to 2 years, 10 years,
Mhm.
it is probably worth at least having that discussion to say, hey, I set this up. I think that it's good. My family is still the same, but has the law changed? Has that changed how this will play out? So just to say that.
Yeah, great point. Great point. All right, we
All
appreciate
right.
everyone tuning in. Yeah, we're going to be giving information like this kind of on a weekly basis, where as questions come in, as we deal with issues through the week, working with families, we're going to bring you that information so that, you can benefit from it. And if it makes sense to ever, give us a ring and schedule an appointment, we'd be happy to accommodate that.
Absolutely. And our website and our contact information will be down in the link below. Please don't hesitate to send an email or anything like that. Be more than happy to talk. All right.
Absolutely. Everyone have a great week. Take care.